Hey, so I'm here with Brendan. Is that how you? Okay, making sure. So let's see. I think you found me in Heather Parody's Facebook group where I meet a lot of amazing people. And the Unconventional Leaders Facebook group. And it was because I talked about being overwhelmed about all the different charities and like which ones do I focus on and like I want to give and I feel like overwhelmed and I need a system or whatever, and you're like, well, hey, here's what I do, see if this helps you or whatever. Here's some of the process that helps me. So that was super awesome and nice. And because you mentioned that like, oh, there are some charities that like basically everyone agrees on, like charity water, like it's nice for people to have clean drinking water. So that's one of your big ones, and to have access to that. So, and that's one that I really support as well. So I loved that. And then it was like 2 months later that you just messaged me like, hey, if you ever want to connect over video chat, just let me know. Love to hear your story. And you like mentioned, I think maybe mentioned Instagram. And so I went to your Instagram and I was like reading through your posts and I was like, oh my goodness. Or maybe that was your last message before that one. And I found one and was like, oh my goodness, I can totally relate to this. I need to talk to him. And so we set up a call that day. And it was really helpful. And so anyway, so I just, after talking to you about that, I was like, I bet my people who are watching these videos would really get a lot out of hearing from you about something interesting that you mentioned about letting go of negative people. And you were like really serious. You were like, oh, I don't have any negative people in my life right now. And so I wanted to talk more about that and let other people hear about it as well. So you told me that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that you lived with your dad for 7 years without speaking to him. Yeah, okay. It seems so crazy. Um, okay, and so go ahead before we get into that and just give a little bit more background. We can talk about it at the end too, but like I know I was going to mention, your like YouTube videos and stuff that you do about helping people with public speaking. And so those are awesome. But go ahead and tell us what else you do.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, so on my end, so my name's Brendan. I'm the founder of Master Talk. So I make YouTube videos on public speaking, and my goal is to help the world master the art of communication because I find that everyone has beautiful ideas, but if they don't have the vehicle to communicate those ideas, they're not going to be able to scale their impact. So that's why I made these videos for people.
It's just so interesting that you talk about communication and then you're also like, oh, like sometimes you cut off that communication with people. And so that's really fascinating to me. Okay, like, yeah, not meaning this like in a bad way, but or like against you or something. But I personally used to be like, oh my goodness, like you don't stop talking to your family. Like that's just wrong. And like I've never been a fan of that. I don't know. And so, but you mentioned it in a way that I was like, oh, like I never thought about it like that, where you were like, I needed to focus on taking care of my family. And so you talked about it as like talking with your dad just really interrupted that. So I felt like these long silences between family members was always a sign of unforgiveness, or even between other people. It doesn't have to be family. But I can see it now as more of like a method of self-preservation or something like that. You can let me know if that's kind of how it is for you. But Um, do you think that you've forgiven your father?
Absolutely. I think the idea is in life, and doesn't apply to most people, but it applies to some for sure, especially those who are working on themselves and watching these types of videos, is depending on what goals you have in your life, whether it's, you want to be a YouTuber like me, or you want to, I don't know, you want to start a family or different, whatever the goal is, you always have a price to pay in exchange for the goal, right? Or the decisions
Mm.
that you make. And in my situation, because the goal became so big, right? And pretty frightening, to be honest, trying to become the number one speaking coach in the world, or more specifically, the best one who ever lived. Because you have those big goals, you need to make hard decisions to make yourself successful. And the issue with very big goals, even though it's a good thing, is most people will think you're crazy and most people won't support them. So that means if you hang around negative people, right? And depending on what your belief system is, if you believe that family is everything, and I do too, but if some people of that family are hindering those goals, if you really want to achieve them, you have a decision to make. And it was a difficult one for me to make, because when I was 16, like, when I was a young kid, my dad wasn't the best person in the world. He wasn't. He was a great person. He came to this country. He worked really hard to get here, but he didn't work on himself enough to raise the next generation in a way of promoting emotional intelligence. Let's put it that way, right? It's not something he really had. So he would lash out with, like, either whether it was physical abuse or just verbal abuse. And because of that, and a lot of people have that same situation, but in that specific context, when that happens, right, obviously I dealt with it for a long time, but at some point, when I was 16, I had to make a decision, because if I just kept this going, I wasn't going to achieve my goal, right? And which at the time was just getting a job and taking care of my mom and my sister. So, and most people in that age group would just take the heat, right? They would just keep getting, attacked and become a statistic. And I chose not to be. And even if it was a very difficult decision for the first couple of months, I knew 7 years later, especially after he passed, that I made the right decision, because, I ended up with the six-figure job I wanted. I, I'm the youngest speaking coach in the world. Like, I'm doing what I want to do in life because I made those hard decisions. Because life and time is very precious, and if you waste a lot of it talking to people you shouldn't be talking to and hindering your own humanity because you don't have a lot of it left, then you might end up regretting it later. And I chose not to.
That's awesome. It is really inspiring. That's so crazy that you keep using the word hindering, because I've started really, like, last year, really focusing on that, and focusing on recognizing what the things are that are hindering me. I read in one of Tim Ferriss's emails, he had a quote, that which hinders your task is your task. Sanford Meisner or something. And yeah, and so I was like, oh, so if these negative voices in your life are hindering you from doing something else, your task is to get rid of the negative voices so you can move on to the other task that you're wanting to do, basically. So, um, okay, so trying to help us understand and learn a little bit more about how we can do this in our own lives. Um, but first, I wanted to talk a little bit more. You kind of hit on it, about, since your father has passed away, just wondering, like, did you have any regrets? But it seems like you didn't. But have you at some point, like, thought, like, maybe in the beginning you felt that way more, like, am I gonna regret this, kind of thing? So just talk a little bit about regret for us.
Of course, and it's definitely something I talk about a lot. So I think it's important to discuss. I think for me, it was more about wishes. A lot in my life, like, I wished my father was a certain way. I wish that he never drank and that we were all a happy family, and I could have showed him all the podcasts I was listening to. And I think that's the challenge, right? Is when we start to work on ourselves, and very few of us do, but the ones who do, the first thing we want to do once that happens is we want to tell everyone else.
And fix everyone
Dad,
else.
you should check out this. and fix everyone else. And the truth is, most people won't meet us halfway there, right? And he was one of those people. So I think the idea with regret is there's definitely some things that I might have wished that I would have gone, like, that emotionally stable father and all that stuff. But I think the better way of looking at it is what were the gifts that he gave me, right? And just being happy with those gifts. And I think the biggest one he gave me was he gave me a chance to actually play the game, which means I didn't have to spend 7 years trying to get to Canada. I was born in Canada, right? I didn't have to fight really hard to get my passport and my citizenship because just for the fact that I was born here, I was automatically given it. So depending on those stories, and my dad worked really hard to get to that point, right? He took like an 8-way flight. He was a refugee that came to Canada and hoped for a better life, right? So in many ways, the way that I see the circumstances, I'm very thankful for his existence because he gave me a chance that I couldn't have gotten myself, that I didn't earn, by the way. I just was born. And the second thing was he had a role to play in this world, and that role was giving birth to me, right? And in many ways, that's how I see it. And in that way, you need to, whenever there's a story or a situation, people are going to respond to it differently. And it's that change in response that's going to make or break your life. Because most people would look at that situation and say, this guy sucks, like he ruined my life, so I'm going to ruin everyone else's, right? Or you can say, this person had a vision, right? He said, look, I'm going to give birth to this person. And then, I came and I used all the anger and hatred that I had from early in my life when I was in my tens, when I was 15, 16, in a way of showing him that I was going to be better than him, right? And in that same way, even if I did end up beating him, it kind of missed the point, right? The point of this entire discussion was because I worked really hard to get and I started hitting my goals, he gave me that competitive spirit that I never would have gotten. And it's that intensity today that allows me to execute Master Talk at a very, very powerful level. And I never would have gotten that if I never hated him in the first place. So the way you need to see it is everyone is a gift in many ways, and he was one as well. It's just the way I interpret that gift is very different than most.
Yeah, I love that
Does that
because
make
it can
sense?
be, yeah, it can be so confusing when you're like, how can you hate someone and love someone so much at the same time? Or like, you know, seeing that there is um, that positive and not just the negative, even though it was someone you were like, I can't talk to you for from now on, basically. So, was that how you kind of set out towards it? Were you like, okay, I'm never going to talk to him again? Or was it like, okay, for now at least, or like, I'm just going to start this? What was that process of beginning it like?
For sure. So, if I'm being perfectly transparent here, most of that decision was anger based. I'm not as rational as I am now. Obviously now I sound very calm and at ease, but that doesn't wasn't the case 7 years ago. It was more just like "f you," like I'm done with this. Like I don't want to. It wasn't really. It was more emotionally based. But initially, it wasn't really forever based on my memory. It was more just like I have this exam that I need to study for, and this person's annoying, and they're not helping me achieve the goal. So I'm just going to stop for a month and see what happens. And obviously, it was hurtful at the beginning. I didn't, he kept yelling at me, and he was like, "Why aren't you talking to me?" And I just kept not responding. But what had happened was after that, after I just stopped talking to him, I started tasting a lot of wins. My grades started shooting up like 20%. Uh, I started getting into the universities I wanted to get into. My mind space started getting better. I started listening to podcasts. And the more I just kept going on this path, the more I realized he wasn't supposed to be on the path. So it just continued and then prolonged until he passed. So it was
Yeah.
more of a progression. It's more just like, and this is advice for your audience, by the way. I know it sucks to get rid of people that you love, but I think the other side of the argument, if you're willing to hear it, is the beauty that awaits you and the magic and impact that you'll end up making. This is what I was telling Megan in our other call is you have a choice to make, which is, are you going to spend the rest of your life using all of your beautiful energy, all of your spirit, your enthusiasm, trying to change one person that you're probably not going to be able to change? Because my mom tried to change him for 7 years and she was wrong. She wasn't able to, right? Even if she tried. And for me, it was, how do I use that same energy and impact millions of lives? Because now I went from a kid in suburban Montreal who just wanted to get a minimum wage job and provide for his family. And now that transition to, I want to help every single human being in the world who struggles with communication have access to free resources, right? So now that went from one person to millions of people. But the punchline is, those two scenarios require the same amount of energy. And if you spend all that energy on that one person, you're just miss the 7 million or 10 million people you could have impacted. And the choice is yours. And for me, those 7, 10 million people, even if I don't know them, were a lot more important to me than that one person.
So how did you talked a little bit about how your father reacted. How did I guess your mom and your sister were also in the house. How did they respond to that?
Yeah. So, and this is going to be interesting because it's going to vary a lot by culture, right? This is going to vary a lot by, because you're from America, American culture. I'm Canadian, but my
Mm-hmm.
parents are from Sri Lanka, so it's a different type of vibe. And the reason why this cultural difference is important to explain is, in my context, even if, my mom was pissed off at me the first 2 months, it's almost as if she accepted it. It was weird. Like, I honestly didn't understand it myself. And I think that's why me and my mom and sister get along very well, because they're always supportive of what I do, even if those decisions might be completely irrational to them. Like when I started my YouTube channel, like the first month, they were like, "What are you doing in your basement?" And then after 6 months, when they started seeing it pick up, they're like, "Oh, okay, Brendan's just doing his thing. That's all right." And I'm fortunate that I had one bad seed in my family. Well, bad seed's the wrong word. I mean, um, a seed that wasn't beneficial to my life later in life. But for everyone else in my family, like, now, ever since that happened and he passed, like, my house has been pretty peaceful for the last 90 days. Like, no one yells at each other anymore. It's just, we're just all normal, to the point that my mom starts to worry a bit. She's like, who do I give advice to? There's like nobody to give. But anyways, the point of all this is the idea is, where are you converting your energy, right? Where are you spending it? And in some cases, especially in your context, maybe, or in any other people's context, it might be, Megan, why aren't you talking to your mom? Why aren't you talking to your sister? And they might nag you about it for multiple months or even years. It's definitely possible. And what I always come back to is your goals, right? It's okay if you like, most people can't do this, right? And I don't actually recommend most people do this, right? Because it's very emotionally hard to make those decisions. But I think if you really truly want to be free, you need to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so kind of flip the table around now, and um, can you speak to the person who may be in the situation where someone's not speaking to them? And maybe offer them some encouragement or some advice. Like, was there anything your dad could have done to like make
That's a hard
that
one.
reconnection, I guess, in your relationship and kind of restore that?
Jeez. And I want to point out, I'm not an expert in this by any means, but I'll definitely try my best to answer it. That's tough. Okay. In my situation, I don't think it would have been possible, because I'm a very extreme case where I'm very cutthroat about the people I remove. And once they're removed, it's very difficult for them to come back to my life. That's only happened once or twice in my life. Most of the time they don't, but it's not because of them. It's because they just don't put the effort to do that. So what I would recommend, okay, if you're someone who, someone isn't speaking to you, or someone doesn't value you, or someone doesn't like you for whatever reason, because that's happened with me, right? Obviously, I'm sure you can tell I'm very extreme, so there's definitely people that are off-putted by who I am and what I do. But what I would say is, if you have, okay, the 3 to 5 people that accept you as you are 100%, then it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks. So I'm very fortunate in life, because I was just a good human being, that I met, great people across my life that I consider friends for life, right? That are, they might not be as growth minded as me, but they're always supportive of what I do, and that's more than enough for me. So what I'd recommend people is to develop an inner circle. So an inner circle is essentially, and this will tie into what you're saying, by the way, an inner circle is essentially a group of individuals that will literally do anything for you. And if you have that group of people, you're going to be successful. And the best part about this whole inner circle jazz is when you're unsuccessful, that is the biggest advantage that you have. So if you're someone who's not very successful right now, whether it's health, financials, however you define it, your point of strength is that the people around you like you for who you are. Because the issue when you become successful is you don't know anymore. You just don't know. Like even now, like, as me, because I'm all master talk emotionally stable, people might like me for, just the way that I speak, not necessarily the person I am, right? So I'd recommend building that inner circle. And the reason that's so important is when people reject you, when people tell you're not good enough, when people think that you're a bad person, when people aren't speaking to you, you have those 5 people, those 3 people to remind you that you're a good person. But if that number is 0 and you're having trouble getting people into your inner circle, that means you need to work on yourself. If there is nobody on earth that you can vouch for to say that this person loves me for who I am, 100% no hedge, then you need to audit yourself and see, what am I doing wrong? Right? What's wrong? What am I, not necessarily what's wrong with me, but how can I work on myself so that I can attract more people into that circle? So that would be my advice.
That's good. That's awesome. Um, okay. I feel like I could just keep going with every answer you give, but I'm like, oh, okay, we can move on. I have other good questions, but thank you. That is helpful. Um, okay, so let's see. Um, okay, yeah, I mentioned that you said that you have like 0 negative people in your life. Um, so kind of want you to, I guess, um, define that a little more because I'm assuming there are still negative people in your town. Maybe you're at a restaurant and the waiter is being negative or something. Like, do you just never go to that restaurant? Do you leave in the middle of your meal? Like, so kind of define what you mean when you say that you have no negative people.
So no negative people means the people that I talk to on a regular basis are not negative. So for instance, if I'm at a restaurant, right, and the server's not too nice, that's okay. I'll take that because it's temporary. Though that doesn't really happen that much because I only go to like 2 or 3 restaurants and everyone's pretty cool usually. But in that situation, yeah. But the reason why I have 0 negative people is because I do a very good job vetting the people around me. So once you have only positive people, you start to get addicted to positive people. It's kind of like this weird, it's like this weird high where you don't realize the value of being only surrounded by positive people until you're actually there. And once you get there, then you're just on fire. So I think one other thing that could be interesting for your audience is, how do I find positive people? Right? Where do you get them? Like, do you buy them at Walmart or something? Like, how does this work? Right? And for me, what I do is, and another way of explaining this advice is, if you can, don't waste time talking to people you shouldn't be talking to. And the example I give is what I do, which is I attend personal development conferences. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of things that excite me, like personal development, growth, health, fitness, all that stuff. So what I do is, a lot of the people that I look up to and that I admire, right, in this space, they hold live events. And I go there and I meet their community. And it's insane because everyone's exactly like you. So what I recommend you do is think about the people that you admire, ask yourself why you admire those people, and see if any of those people have live events, and then attend them. And this analogy is not just for people who want to grow and all this stuff. Something simple, super simple, okay? If you like collecting stamps, chances are there is nobody in your friend group right now who shares the same hobby as you. Okay, you're the only person who likes collecting stamps. You like it. Nobody else gives a shit that you collect stamps. So my recommendation is, don't spend your whole life being the only person that you know who collects stamps. Go online, find a stamp collecting conference, fly out to it, spend some money instead of going to Punta Cana on vacation, and go meet everyone else who collects stamps. Your life's quality will skyrocket because you'll be like, well, Jim collects stamps, and your life will just be amazing. Right? So
That's
that's what
so
I would say.
true. And even for like that's happened to me with Facebook groups. Like even if I didn't attend an event, like a Facebook group can be a sort of event, and maybe I meet the people on video like with you, but also some of them I have like met them through a Facebook group. Maybe I did video with them and then I've met them in person since then. And I feel like we've been friends for years now, and that is awesome. And one of the other examples is fountain pens. I on my last video like this that I did, I knew that person liked fountain pens, and me and my husband do it, and we've been to a fountain pen conference, and it's so funny, and we like watch YouTube videos about it, like it's crazy, and we kind of
I
connected
love
over
it.
that because I like writing. Like I didn't know about fountain pens really. He's still the one that like cleans them and fills them with ink and like crazy stuff. Um, but that was something that we kind of embraced together, and it brought us closer. But also, yeah, we've like met a lot of really nice people through that as well. And so I think that's really interesting that you bring that up, and really good advice. So let's see. Um, okay, so you mentioned like vetting people out. Um, is like what is that exactly? Like, okay, there's one way to like pursue positive people, and then like at what point are you like, okay, maybe this isn't a relationship that I want to continue, and like how is that process going?
I love your questions, by the way, Maggie. You're spot on. I love it. You're a very solid interviewer. I'm just putting it out there. But so the idea of vetting out people means I have this rule. Okay, it's pretty extreme that you don't have to apply, but it's worth mentioning to your audience that I call 95-5. So every time I have a new goal, I force myself to remove 95% of my network. So removing doesn't mean deleting. Removing means I just start saying no to them. So for example, Jim comes up to me and says, Jim's not a real person. I'm just using an example. So Jim says, hey, Brendan, you want to go to the bar and, party? And I go, no, I'd rather stay home and listen to podcasts. So if somebody's starting to hinder my new goal, I have to remove them. And a good example is when I transitioned from university into being an influencer slash in the corporate world. So when I was in university, my goal was just to get a job, right? It wasn't like to start Master Talk or anything. It was like, let me try and get a job. So most of the people in my network were people I knew in university. Whether they were, a bit negative. I didn't really like the negative people, but I still, they weren't like super ambitious. But when I transitioned to Master Talk and I needed to become, the number one speaking coach and help the world master communication, all that jazz, I needed to change my network. So I'm only surrounded by people who actually believe I can pull it off. And the issue was I couldn't really find anyone in my city to do that with, because most people weren't very ambitious. They weren't really pushing hard for those types of things, or really didn't understand what I was doing. Some did, but not everyone. So I chose to fly out to events to replace my entire network. So 95% of the people that I spoke to in university, I no longer speak to. They're still in my friendship group. I still ask them to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I still show them my content, but I don't spend time talking to them over video or messaging them or meeting them for coffee.
Okay. All right, very nice. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. Please tell us how your life is different. You've hinted at it a little bit, but if you have anything else to add, like how is your life different, like being free of negative people?
Yeah. And to be honest, it's an odd feeling that's hard to explain because I don't even it's so weird because I don't even remember what it's like to be around negative people anymore. And I seriously like I'm honest about that. What I will say it's very freeing and very peaceful. Like you don't wake up stressed. Most people I find in life, they complain about their friends, they complain about their family, they're always talking about drama, blah, 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 and they keep running their mouth. And those are the people that I would never talk to, because those people talk a lot but don't actually want to help humanity or society, in my opinion, at a large scale. So for me, it's just very freeing and relaxing that I don't have to talk about drama, that every conversation that I have with people is a conversation I want to have, and I get to live on my terms. And I think that ability to take control over your life at any point, whether you're, very young like me, or whether you're, you know, nearing retirement, I feel at the point where you decide to take control of your life, everything else becomes clear. So let me repeat that again. The day that you decide to take control of your life, everything else becomes clear. So like this whole situation that we're in right now, I feel very at peace because I know the people I need to speak to at any given day. I know the people I want to speak to. I know what I need to do during the day. And more importantly, I can spend the day doing what I love, which is, spending like 15 hours listening to podcasts or something. So when everything else becomes clear, the biggest thing is you believe you're unstoppable. Like I literally believe I can do whatever I want in life and achieve it because of the people around me. And if you have a big dream and you have a big goal and you want to play big in life, negative people will hinder that goal. So work hard to remove them and you'll reap in the benefits really quickly.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you kind of like stopped talking out of anger, but did you know anyone else who had done this, or maybe even just after all this with your dad, but when you were just really being intentional about getting rid of negativity, like was there someone else who had talked about that in like one of those podcasts or something, like someone who inspired you to pursue that even more, or were you just figuring it out on your own?
So I'm more of a unique case. I think that's why I'm a teacher, in the sense of I kind of figured that out on my own, but I don't know how. But being honest, what happened later in life was when I started listening to podcasts. This was 2, 3 years after I cut them off. And a lot of the influencers in this space started validating what I had done. So, for example, there's this great podcast with this woman named Catherine Woodwork Thomas. She says it more on the context of romantic relationships, but applies a lot in any type of relationship, in the sense of when you leave someone, you're not necessarily cutting them off or saying bad things about them, but you're just letting them go. Right. And I think there's a big difference between tearing someone out and letting them go. So tearing someone out is when you remove someone in your relationship and you're always talking about them all the time. You're just like, oh, this person terrible. What did they do to me? Life sucks. But when you let someone go, it's as if they were never really a part of it, right? You don't spend your mental energy thinking about them, and you just say, man, life is so amazing. I don't know why, but life is great. So I think the idea is just podcasts have definitely helped me because, and this is going to be true for most of society, since most of us don't have role models in this space. We probably a lot of us come from abusive households, whether that abuse is in different levels, right? Some of it's minor, like my case wasn't extreme, but because we don't have those role models in our life, we need to seek them out. And I think the beauty now is you can talk to someone like me, you can talk to someone like Megan without even meeting us. And I think that is the beauty of virtual mentors. And that's what I really leveraged early on in my life, because I didn't have the money for like a therapist or anything like that. So that's what I would do. Seek out virtual mentors that you think will add value to your life and leverage them so you can then learn from them, and then you can teach it back to your local communities.
Okay, so you have these really positive people in your life. How does that work? Like, are they never negative, or it's like, oh, they say one negative thing and you're like, oh, see ya. Like, like just, I don't know, to help us understand a little more.
Absolutely. You're right. Okay, it's not that extreme, but I meant in the sense of what's your average, right? If every conversation I have with you is just you complaining about someone else, I'm definitely going to cut you off. 100%. Like, it's not even a doubt. But if it's like I don't know, we're having a 3-hour conversation, and at some point you complain about someone for 10 minutes. I won't mind. If it happens 2, 3 times, I literally, this is for the 5 people in my core group. Because remember, this is what I told my little sister. I asked her the following question, because I have like 1,500 Facebook friends, right? So I asked her, how many friends do you think I have? She said, I don't know, like 1,000. Like, aren't you like popular and stuff? And I replied with 5. I have 5 friends. Everyone else are people that are either adding value to my life or I'm adding value to them. But they're people I don't consider like best friends, right? I have 5 of them. And that's important because with those 5 people, if they complain too much, I call them out on it almost immediately. I just say, quit complaining. I say worse stuff to them, but you get the idea. Don't complain. And they stop complaining. It's not they don't go, oh, like, F you, like, what do you mean don't complain? Like, no, they just go, okay.
Yeah, we need that the reminder. Like, it's nice to have people like that who will call you out as well, because when you are that type of person who is trying to be positive, and then you're like, oh, but I'm actually not. Like, it's really good to have that kind of accountability and just those reminders to
And
keep
something
track.
that would be fun for your audience to know is it doesn't necessarily need to be people who are similar to you. Like, my 5 people are very different. One of them is a 6'4" jock that played like very hardcore sports, who's like an accountant now. One other person is this real estate person. Other person's a rapper. Like, everyone who works at a hospital, like, everyone's very different, but they all have the same values, right?
That's awesome. That's good. Yeah, that helps. Okay. Let's see. Um, okay. Have you ever had a negative person become a positive person in your life? I don't know. You're still young. You may not have had that happen. Just curious. It's okay if not.
That's a great question. I would say in some instances, yes, but not fully. So let's say, for example, me and my sister have not fought in over 10 years, literally. The last time we had a fight, I think I was like 12 or something. So I've never fought with my sister ever. But in that journey, in that 10 years, whenever she was negative, whenever she complained, and same thing with me, whenever I was negative or whenever I complained, which is very little of the time, we would call each other out on it. So I think what I've experienced is someone who was maybe 20% negative and reduce that over time to maybe 5 or 3 or 1% negative. I've never really seen anyone who is fully negative turn into someone fully positive. And that's maybe just a flaw in my character because I just cut them out really quickly before they have a chance to transition. But what I will say, okay, if it's a piece of advice for your crowd, is don't play the conversion game. Okay, most people, they make the mistake of thinking they can change anyone. And the truth is, that's only going to work maybe 2% of the time, probably less. Most of the time, and this is true with romantic relationships, by the way, don't get into a relationship with someone who you want to change because you won't be able to change them. And then you'll get frustrated and then you'll want to leave them, right? Work with someone who's already working on themselves. Help someone who's open to the advice, even if you don't know them. And spend your energy on someone who wants your energy and is reciprocating it back to you, right? Because if you waste all your time trying to convert people who don't want to change, you are going to exhaust yourself. And worst of all, you're going to give up on helping anybody. And that is the scenario I don't want any of you to go through. Because I went through some parts of that myself, when I was 14 or 15, and I kept telling my dad to stop. He just never would listen. And that lasted what, 3? No, it lasted, to be honest, it was my whole childhood. It was like 0 to 16. And then I stopped. Right? And it changed my life.
Yeah, and trying to do that can really like bring you down and start making you more negative and stuff if you let it. So yeah, that's a really important aspect of it as well. Okay, so as a like decluttering expert, that's what I wrote my first book on, is how I went from being a pack rat to clutter free. But I talk about a lot about like letting go without regret and letting go of possessions rather than people that give you these negative emotions or make you feel imprisoned in some way. And so I give them like questions that they can ask themselves about each possession. And, to give them something kind of practical that they can use to help them decide how to get rid of something without regret. Do you have something like that that you could apply to getting rid of or like letting go, like you said, of people? What are some questions you ask?
It's actually one simple one, which is in 10 years, okay, do you believe you would have been able to achieve your goals with that person? Yes or no? And why or why not? So if you use me and my father as an example, my goal was to have a six-figure income, to get straight A's, to be a good person, to help others. Was I going to achieve that goal by talking to him every day? And the answer was a flat out no. If I kept talking to him, I never would have believed that I would have been able to achieve my goals. Because every time I put a suit on or I went to a cocktail, he would always laugh at me. He'd always go like, what are you doing wearing a suit? You're like 16, 17. You're not going to do anything with your life. Why are you even going to school? Like he would say these things, right? And then at some point it was like, okay, so if I just kept talking to him for 10 years, what's going to happen? I'm not going to achieve the goal. And I need to achieve the goal, right?
Yeah.
And most people, maybe they just give up on the goal, but I don't give up on the goal. Never. So I removed him. So I use that same framework with everyone. But the basis is very simple. Is this person supporting or hindering my goals? And goals doesn't necessarily mean, oh, this person's going to help me make money. No. Is this person helping you in any other way, like emotional support, like helping, like my mom and sister support my goals? Are they helping me make my YouTube channel? No, but they help me around the house. They optimize my life for me, so I don't have to spend time on household chores, and I really appreciate them for doing that for me. And they support me, so I support them with whatever they need, whether it's emotional support, helping them through their education, all that stuff. So in that same way, what you need to do, if you're really serious about this, is you need to look at every single person in your circle and you audit them individually. In 10 years, when I've achieved the goal, will that person have contributed to it or not? And if not, why? And if so, in what way? So I'll repeat that again. Audit every single person in your circle. Look at every single person, the individual. And imagine yourself achieving the goal that you have for yourself in 10, 15 years, 5 years, whatever. And ask yourself if the person that you're auditing, did that person contribute to that goal or hinder it? And if no, why? So why isn't this person a value add? And if so, in what way did that person add value to your life?
Yeah. Wow, that is so good. Oh man. So, okay, so is that how basically all of your conversations were with your father? Was it just like kind of just arguing over something or like trying to prove your point, trying to convince each other of your perspective? Yeah, so kind of just like, yeah, big time waster. How long would these conversations go before you did put an end to them?
They were more about, it wasn't like long conversations about like him attacking me. It was more like little bite-sized pieces throughout the day. So let's say I would start working on a project in school and I'd be at home, tapping with the computer. He would interrupt me every 30 minutes and say, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm working on," like, and he'd be totally, intoxicated at like, I don't know, like 12 or something, like lunch. And I'd be like, "I'm working on my project." And that's right. I started getting pissed at him. And I was like, after the fifth time, I was like, "Stop bothering me. Like, I'm working on this project." And then he would start yelling at me. He's like, don't ever talk to me that way. And then after I just got angry and angry and ruined my day. But it happened every single day.
Yeah.
Right. So
And then,
it was more just,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Just having that happen over and over, and also like even when he's gone and the conversation's over, like you can replay it in your head. You are using so much mental energy. At least that's how it is for me, where it's just like, this is frustrating, or like, oh, I could have said something different, or is anything ever gonna be enough for him? Like, I feel like that's the kind of things that happens with me anyway when I have negative conversations. Like, it's not just the amount of time that we're talking. Like, I think about it so much more. It takes up so much more time and energy as well. So
Right.
that's a good point.
Like even the little example just now where you said, "Oh, you go ahead," and I went, "Oh no, you go ahead." Like just that is a contribution towards my goals because you're very respectful of other people's spaces, right? Just that little thing can be a huge value add to someone, and it's unfortunate that most people don't even have that.
Yeah. All right. So those are like pretty much all of my main questions for you. So let's see. What I guess would be the main place you talk about YouTube a lot. I'm connected with you on Facebook and Instagram too, but is YouTube where you would recommend people checking your stuff, or do you have a website that you'd like to send them to, or how can they learn more about all the awesome things you have to offer?
For sure, and I appreciate you asking. Like, what I would say to folks is if you have any questions whatsoever, whether it's life or public speaking or anything, message me on Instagram. I'm super accessible. I'm at Master Your Talk. I answer every DM that I get. I'm not famous by any means, so feel free to send me a message. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. And for my YouTube channel, which is Master Talk in one word, if you're someone who wants to work on your communication skills or was just interested in it in general for whatever goal you had, feel free to check out those videos and send me some feedback over on Instagram. I'd be happy to discuss that with you over there.
Yes, and it is really a good content and like helpful little things you can do. I definitely watched one of those and was like, oh yeah, that's smart. So definitely check that out. And he like it's not just on this video call that we're doing this, like he provides really good, like thoughtful conversation answers to questions. Yeah, so I do recommend contacting him if you have more questions about something we've talked about or just want to connect. So, okay, well, thank you so much for everything. If you have any last words, you can go ahead and share some final encouragement or whatever. But other than that, we're good.
Yeah, I think what I'd leave your audience with is the number one life advice that I have for people, which is what I call step into your insanity. Okay, because the brain is wired for survival and not happiness. Most people do what other people expect them to do because the best way to survive is to comply. So if Megan wants me to go to a party and I don't want to go to the party, I'm still going to go because I want to fit in and I want Megan to accept me, right? And in life, most people comply and they don't do things outside of the norm. So step into your insanity simply means communicating the weird things that you do on a daily basis to the public so that you can remind yourself that you're different. And if you keep doing this, you'll wake up one day and you'll ask yourself the following question, which is, why is everyone else doing what everyone else is expecting them to do? And most people, when they take their first step towards that insanity, they take the step back and go, yeah, I never thought about that question. And other people take another step and another step and another step. So my question is, how many steps are you willing to take? And the reason I became successful is because I sprinted towards it. I didn't care what anyone else wanted. I wanted to figure out my truth, and I just did it in my tens, right? That's all. So if you're able to step into your insanity, I believe that you'll be able to step into yourself. And that means communicating the weird stuff. Like for me, I love Justin Bieber. I sing 3 languages. I mean, I can speak 3 languages, but I can karaoke in 8. And my favorite hobby is dancing alone in my basement. And notice how confidently I'm saying all this because I'm very comfortable in my own skin. So if you can communicate those weird things, you might just step into yourself one day.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.